We're all told you need to train hard, you need to train harder, but not that hard. All right. You also need to increase the volume, but not too much volume. You need to make sure that you have adequate rest, but not too rest. But at the same time, if you're not able to recover, you need cold plunges, infrared saunas, peptides, and all this other shit to be able to help you to recover from that standpoint. And it just keeps going on and on and on, where here's the most optimal RIR, reps in reserve, however somebody wants to be able to define that. How exactly do you know what 2 reps in reserve are? Or the RPE, is the RPE, are you allowed to be psyched up for it? Are you allowed to not try? Are you allowed to put in most effort? All these things that people get so caught up in with intensity zones, muscle fiber recruitment, fucking methylene blue, peptides, you name it, all the stuff that gets all the clicks and that everybody hyper focuses on, that's all nuance. The common sense is fucking thrown out the window. For instance, if I'm to show this card here, but on this card, you're going to see there's a margin, a black margin that goes around that whole rim of this card. This black margin is all the nuances that everybody is hyper focused on. All those things that I was talking about. The white space would be the common sense, where most people have completely forgotten about. And I get it. You know, most of the conversations I have with podcast guests, we hyper focus on the nuance. I'll geek out on the nuance because the nuance it's interesting. I'm very curious about it, and it has its place. And that place for most of the people that are listening is not what you think it is. It might be that margin for most people listening to this might be 5 or 10%. So all these things that people are hyper focused on and clickbaiting on, and the discussions revolve around, and all the reels and all the other crap that kind of gets into all that, is for that small margin. Now, as a lifter progresses throughout the years and gets closer to what we would, I guess, call a genetic limit, or where their top is, then the margin's going to get a little bigger. Maybe it looks like the black space around the Table Talk logo that's on this. And that's where it becomes interesting. That's where it becomes, where I get very curious, you know, and how those things are done. But the only way that margin becomes bigger is if that common sense part, the stuff that actually works and makes a difference, is so locked in and so ingrained that zero focus or very little focus has to go into that. But the fact of the matter is, with the majority of the people, there's not enough focus. I wanted to say little to none focus on that. And then they wonder why they're not progressing. And they think they're not progressing because everything they see is talking about the nuance and everything that's in the margins. And that's the questions that anybody in this industry gets. Certain things have been around for decades, that the basic things that everybody knows. And when I list these off, not one of them is going to sound like, oh man, I really am screwing that one up. You're all going to think, oh yeah, I know that, I know that, I know that. But if you really think about it and you really get down into it and you're honest with yourself, you're screwing them up. You know, the same way I'll screw them up and everybody else screws them up. And the easiest thing to do is to jump to the fun shit in the margins and go there. And I get it. I said, I get it more than what you guys understand, because a lot of the topics that we talk about on the podcast are, again, that, because maybe as an industry, we need to do a better job of harping what those basic common sense things are, because it spreads further than just the people that take training extremely serious. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. When last week I was traveling, and sometimes I'll go to a more hardcore gym. Sometimes I'll go to a commercial gym. I like to go to the commercial gyms, steam room, sauna, all that, the recovery crap, right? That I'm lacking, because that's why I'm not making progress, is because I'm not doing the right fucking contrast recovery methods. But I like to go for that, but just to kind of see how people are training, and while doing my cardio and just kind of watching normal people train, right? Not meathead people, but the normal meathead people train. And it was a big club. You know, I'm not going to mention names of the clubs, but this is the case no matter where I go, anytime it's a big club, every time. The majority of the people that are in there training are middle age. Let's put it that way. And I'll look around and I'll see the same things that every one of you guys are going to see as well. You see a lot of people that are doing, I don't even want to say partial reps. They're doing like quarter reps with machines. We're not talking like barbell stuff here, just normal middle-aged people. And moving from one machine to the other machine. And yes, they sit on the same machine the whole entire time. I get that. But as they're moving around, you know, I realize things that other people won't notice. Maybe it's the 15 years or so that I spent working as a personal trainer and training people. They don't adjust the seats, you know, so wherever the seat height was, or wherever the pad was adjusted, wherever the machine adjustments were, they're just going to go with that. Shit, half the time they don't even adjust the weight. And then they'll get in there and they're ignorant, right? Not in a bad way. Nobody's taken the time to actually show them, right? This is following me where I'm going here. Meanwhile, there's 3 fitness instructors that are walking around the floor, not the personal trainers, but the instructors that are walking around the floor and stopping and talking to them. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, you can't tell this, you know, 58-year-old dude that looks like he's been through the shredder his entire life, that maybe it's a good idea to use more than 1/8 range of motion, and you would probably feel better after doing 1 or 2 sets with this bigger range of motion. But they don't do that. I don't know, they're talking to them about their dog or whatever it's going to be. And I commend the people for actually going in there and train, but the trainer's job is to be able to help people to understand how to use the equipment. Now, on the flip side of this, there are personal trainers in there as well. And one of them had a fucking stopwatch on, which no problem with that. But I'm trying to figure out, is the client doing circuits? I'm trying to figure out what the stopwatch is for. Timing rest periods? Is it a circle? Are they doing EMOMs? Like what it is. And after a little bit of time, I figure out he's actually timing the set. Why? I don't know. Like one set was 7 reps, one set was 12 reps. But either way, they can do better, or people can do better, right? And the reason why I'm telling this story is 2 of the trainers, one of them was a stopwatch guy. They're in the locker room, and I'm in the locker room because the locker room you got to go through to get to the fucking steam room, which is kind of why I was there in the first place. And they're talking about RFK and how bad, you know, big pharma is and big food. And I don't necessarily disagree with any of that kind of shit. But all that's going through my head is, dude, you're the front line of defense here. You're putting all the blame on all these other things on why people are not as healthy as what they should be. Meanwhile, you got clients on the floor that you don't even know how to fucking train, and putting the blame someplace else. And that seems to happen a lot in this industry, to where you kind of have to ask yourself, ourselves, that if the obesity epidemic is higher than it's ever been, and the health crisis is higher than it's ever been, and we represent the health, fitness, and strength industry, then you know what? Using some common sense, maybe we're fucking failing and need to change what we're doing. So there's my rant on the common sense from the layperson all the way to the person that puts training as one of their top priorities. So when we get down into what are some of the things that are the white space, consistency, that's one. Again, that one is one to where You want to train frequently, but you're going to be told not too frequently and not too little. But you're not told what actually is what would be optimal for you. So let's just think this through a little bit. How much time do you actually have to be able to devote to doing your training? How many days per week? Start there. That's called fucking common sense. If it's 2 days a week, well, then you're going to do 2 days a week. If it's 3, then you're going to do 3. All these things can be boiled down into just that simple common sense shit. Yes, you need to train hard. And to me, most people probably don't train hard enough, right? So it's when you get into that, it gets into that, again, that nuance that you want to train hard, but you can't train too hard because you're going to overtrain. You're probably not going to fucking overtrain. And if you train hard and you get to the point where you're training too hard, you don't think that you're going to realize within the next few training sessions you do that you're not going to feel as strong or as good as you did in the ones leading up to them. I think you're going to know if you're training too hard. That's pretty common sense. It's pretty easy to figure that out. So train harder. If it feels like you're not recovering from session to session, you probably train too hard. Now, on the flip side, if you train too little, are you going to know from session to session if you train too little? How can people not figure this shit out? It blows my mind. Master the big compound lifts, right? That's another big one that I would put in there as being part of that white space. Every lift that you're going to do is going to fall into a certain category of exercises: a vertical pull, a horizontal pull, a squat, a hinge, a press. And maybe I'm forgetting one of them there because this is more rant than it is anything else. Master what that is. Master what that feels like. You don't have to become a super technician about it unless you're a competitive lifter, but you should know what the movement feels like and what the range of motion feels like. Maybe you can't do, going back to the people I was speaking about, maybe you can't do a full range of motion because pain. First thing I would say, common sense wise, is maybe try something else to be able to see if there's something else that you can do. The next thing would be, if there's pain in it, then is there something that you can do to be able to help strengthen that area so there isn't any pain there? So the effort thing and the consistency thing, if you just think this through, it's not that hard to figure out. And the mastering the lifts is the same way. You know, obviously I'm going to be biased and think that a squat, bench, and deadlift should be part of your training. And it's not that hard to find tutorials on how to, well, here we go again, to find tutorials on how to squat, how to bench, and how to deadlift. Yes, you're going to see a lot of different techniques. You're going to see a lot of different cueing. You're going to see all this other shit, which is going to confuse the shit out of everybody. It confuses the shit out of me. But you're also going to see commonalities from it. Make sure your joints are stacked. Look for the commonalities that are in there. But the more that you can master that technique of these movements, the more you're going to be able to progress on them and the more you're going to be able to get out of them. You can also master the movements just simply by controlling the tempo. Think about it. If you're not good at a freaking easy bar curl, who cares? If you're not good at it and you just slow the tempo down, then you're probably going to be much better at it. And then keep it the slow tempo until you master the movement, and then you can start to apply more force. Just think this crap. Actually, just do this. If you've been training for a handful of years, act like you're taking in somebody that's never been in the gym before. They're fucking 10 years old, and you're going to show them how to do the lifts. Do that. Just do that. It's as simple as that. Just do that with yourself. And then how most don't when you look through. The next one would be intentional programming. There has to be some type of intentional programming, say progressive overload, that's going to be involved in the training. Unless you just want to train because you want to train because it's something fun to do, then whatever, who cares? You still need the consistency. but there has to be some kind of progressive overload, some type of programming that's in there, so you're not training one body part every month, or however we want to go down that rabbit hole. But even with progressive overload, that in its simplest form, increase the weight every single time you do the movement. Everybody gets that. Everybody understands that. But if you could do that every week for the whole entire time you train, I'd be squatting 9,000 pounds and benching, equivalent to all that. There's no rule that says the weight has to be increased at a certain weekly or training interval. You can use simplest programming, 3 sets of 10, whatever. You can use 3 sets of 10 with 95 pounds on a movement. And maybe the first week, the 3 sets of 10 is not so easy. Maybe it's 10, 10, 9. You can stay with the 95 pounds for a month until the 3 sets of 10 feels easier. Hell, if you do the 3 sets of 10 on week 1 and you get through the 3 sets of 10 and you stay with that same weight for a month, by the time the month is over, you're going to kill the 3 sets of 10 and it's going to feel easy. That's still progressive overload. But this common sense thing gets turned all fucking upside down, and people think it has to be every single time you do the movement. That's not the case. It just, over a period of time, has to have some type of progression. And guess what? If it stops progressing, change to something else. This is not this complicated that I don't understand how this all gets lost. Falling back on all of it, when we get into recovery and nutrition. The recovery I kind of already touched on. Are you recovering from training session to training session? Then your recovery is probably okay. If you're not recovering from training session to training session, then how's your nutrition? How's your sleep? These are other factors that are going to kind of play into there. Are those on point? If you're not sleeping 6 to 7 hours, then that's probably a problem. And the answer to that problem probably isn't some fucking sleep supplement or some light therapy or blocker glasses that you need. The answer is probably just to try to go to bed earlier.